guys, Synova here. I'm back for video 2 in this series. I am talking about the beginnings of Dixie Mafia and the different things that we have found in the research that I have done for my newest book, The Dawn of the Dixie Mafia. Now, I have a few books that I recommend that you read if you're interested in the history of Phenix City, which is where we believe that's the first time that I found an actual organization that would lead to what we know as the Dixie Mafia. Now, it was actually referred to as the Dixie Mafia. So many people want to say that that Dixie Mafia is something that a word that was made up later by newspapers. Well, this is something that is incorrect because this was actually being referred to as the Dixie Mafia. I'm looking through my book here. It was actually being referred to as the Dixie Mafia by different officials at the nearby Fort Benning military base there. Let's see if I'm trying to find the date. Let's see. So basically, this is where we think that it began because, let's see, this was 1952. 1952. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'm going to read you this quote. I read it in the last video, but in case you haven't seen that, I want you to make sure and go back and watch it. This quote is from Major Cullen O'Connor to General Haggerty. This is the major general that was at Fort Benning that was having so much trouble with his soldiers being abused and killed and taken advantage of at Phenix City at the gambling houses. Okay, so it says the most deadly enemy you will face in the entirety of your career is the Dixie Mafia based out of Phenix City, Alabama. This is a quote that I took from an official document that was a letter from Major O'Connor to General Haggerty that he was asking for help because things had gotten so bad, his soldiers had gone missing. In that letter, he talks about 19 men of his men had been killed and are missing or missing. And so it doesn't give the list of the 19 men, but that was 19 men that they knew of. When a soldier came into Phenix City and went to the clubs, they had a series of women prostitutes that were paid specifically to target soldiers, and they were called the B girls. Now, these B girls would dress provocatively, of course. They would come in and they would literally target you if you were a soldier. The idea was the owner of the B girls, the idea was you were not to allow a soldier to leave the property, to leave the city with any money left. And I make a joke, and pants were optional. Well, that's a joke until you get beaten, robbed, stabbed, and then you're down to your boxers and you're sent back to your army base. So it's not a joke if it happens to you. But basically, the B girls were hired specifically just to take advantage of soldiers. And so they would con them into coming over and breaking the rules because they weren't supposed to come over. And they would break the rules. They'd come over, they'd gamble, they'd get taken advantage of, they'd have to get back. Well, there was one specific incident where everybody's heard of General Patton. He was one of the biggest testosterone driven generals in our history. I mean, he was, over the top. We won't get into the politics of his antics, but basically he was a powerhouse, male, dominant general that would literally, nobody told him no for anything. Well, some of his boys were going to war and they were at Fort Benning. Now, they were going to leave on Monday morning to go to war. And so they were allowed to go ahead and have one last weekend because, they may not make it back. And then, so they're like, go ahead, have your fun. So they went across to from Fort Benning, they went across the bridge to Phenix City. Well, they were completely taken advantage of. They were beaten. They were thrown in jail for public drunkenness. And they couldn't get out. And so somehow word got back to General Patton that his boys had been taken advantage of and that they were in jail, and they wouldn't let them go. They wouldn't let them post bail. They wouldn't let them out for nothing. General Patton calls the sheriff of Phenix City. Now this is one of the biggest powerhouse generals of the day. He calls the sheriff at Phenix City and says, you better let my boys go. They're due for, they're going to be deployed on Monday morning. And the sheriff is cocky enough. I'm sorry, that's probably not an appropriate word, but too bad. The sheriff was arrogant enough. He's like, too bad. They can't get out of jail because the judge doesn't come in until Monday afternoon. Well, General Patton, he's like, he doesn't take that crap. And so General Patton's like, you let my boys go, or they better be on the bridge at a certain time. He's like, if they're not, I'm driving these tanks across the bridge and I'm going to smash your city to dust. Okay. So I guess the sheriff pushed it so bad, so far, that General Patton literally lined his tanks up on the edge of the bridge on the Fort Benning side, had them running and locked and loaded, ready to roll across the bridge before the sheriff finally backed down and let his soldiers back across the bridge. So this is how over the top corrupt the city was. Even one of our most feared wartime generals didn't have enough say, enough authority to get his own men back without threatening violence and bringing in the tanks. So this is the insanity that was Phenix City. Okay, so now this video is actually going to be talking about a very public assassination, and unfortunately it seemed like the community for many decades was just very apathetic. It didn't pertain to them, so they didn't pay attention to it until it got to this point. It literally broke them, and they said enough's enough. And this is, unfortunately, it took a death of an innocent man before anything was finally done. And that man was Albert Patterson. I kind of introduced you to Albert Patterson in the last video. Let me see if I have a picture here real quick. I believe I have a picture of Albert Patterson. Okay, now these are just on Google. I don't own these photos, so I'm just going to share my screen with you so you can see them. So we're going to share here. Okay. Now, I know there's a bit of a lag, so I apologize if you can't see it yet. This is actually a poster for his campaign. Now, the Russell Betterman Association was a group of community leaders who were trying to fight the corrupt machine in Phenix City, and they knew they couldn't do it with the law because the law was corrupt. So the only way they knew to fight this was to get a non-corrupt candidate into these different positions of power. And so they had Albert Patterson. He ran for Attorney General. Now he didn't believe he was going to win. They literally beat people up at the polling places. They bought hundreds of thousands of votes. I mean, they did everything they could, but they didn't do quite enough, and he actually won. Now, they tried to go in afterwards and change the vote counts. They tried everything they could, every con game they could, but Albert Patterson was the man. He was going to be taking office soon, and they were done because the Attorney General was the one that had the power to steamroll over the corruption in Phenix City, and it looked like they had lost. Okay, so the Dixie Mafia had lost. Well, they don't take losing very easily, and unfortunately, this man had a premonition that he was not going to make it. He said he had told a group of people the very night before this happened. He told them, it's only 100 to 1 that I'll ever take office. So he was within a few days or so of taking office, and he was working late one night. It was June 18th, 1954. He was working late one night, and he was his office was right in town. I think I have a picture of it. So let me stop sharing this picture and go over and share. See if I can share a picture of his office. See if I think I have a picture of his office. I don't, but I have a picture of his crime scene, of his death scene. Okay. All right. So his office was right on Main Street there, and he was working until 9 p.m. and he stepped out of his office, and people even saw him, stepped out of his office, and he was shot 4 times. He was shot in the body, in the face, and then in his face, in his mouth, and so it shattered his teeth and everything. And he was shot there, and he died in the street right in front of his law office. Now let me share the screen. And like I said, I don't own this picture. This one actually comes from the malefactorsregister.com. You can check it out. Let me see if I can zoom in. This is actually one of the original crime scene photos from, I'm going to try to enlarge it. Oh, it's not letting me enlarge it any bigger. I think that's as big as I'm going to be able to get it. So it's check out the Malefactors Register website. That's where you can find this. Like I said, it's not my photo. It is a historical photo. I think you can find it on historicphotoimages.com too, or something like that. But anyways, this is the murder scene. Now, this right here to your left is his law offices over here. He walked around here, and then in this alleyway, you can see his car parked right there. He was shot getting into his car. Now, I'm going to stop sharing the screen. Okay, so up until this point, everybody knew that this was a cesspool. Everyone knew that it was corrupt. Everyone that lived in the somewhat area community, they felt helpless. If they wanted to change, they didn't know how. Some of them, they just turned a blind eye, like nothing was going on. Some people just, like, whatever the reasoning is, it was as if this finally made everyone stand up and take notice. This man had fought so hard, and he had run on an anti-corruption ticket. The entire state had voted him in. Okay, this was Attorney General was for the whole state, and yet this one city thought that they could rule what the whole state said, and it was just the final straw. Well, that is when the governor of Alabama, he said it was enough, and he issued martial law. And that is the very first time in this country that martial law had been declared outside of a riot or a natural disaster. And so the next video will go into the details of what that meant. They brought in General Crack Hanna with his military and his tanks. And we'll talk about the rise of the Phenix in the next video. So make sure you check out my new book, Dawn of the Dixie Mafia. But also, I want you to check out, this book is by Margaret Ann Barnes, The Tragedy and Triumph of Phenix City, Alabama. Make sure and check out this book. This book gives you all the details, gives you an insider's view on what things is like. And it's got a lot of pictures in it too. Like this picture right here. This is a picture of people who were trying to vote for Albert Patterson. They were caught and beaten at the polls, and yet nobody was doing anything about it. Well, eventually it would change, and it would take martial law and the military to fix it. And our next video will be about the details of that. I hope you enjoy this series. I'll see you in the next video.